Week 1, Day 4, Strategic Planning. In this lecture, we'll talk about strategic planning of social media advertising campaigns. First, we'll start off by talking about social media maturity stages. The first stage is the trial stage. This is the adaptation phase. This is when you're testing social media platforms, don't really consider how social media can play a role in the overall marketing plans, but you're just testing it out for your brand. The second phase is the transition phase. This is when social media activities still occur somewhat randomly. However, a more systematic way of thinking starts to develop for the brand. And then you have the strategic phase. There is a formal plan of social media marketing activities, clear objectives, clear matrix, and it's now a key component of the marketing plan. So these are your four phases of a brand that a brand goes through before it implements a plan. So we all know how to use some form of social media, and if we don't know a particular social media, we can probably still figure it out. So why do we need to plan? Well, here's why. Luck only takes you so far. So we're talking about branding and advertising campaigns. We want to take the guess out of our goals and what we're going to do with this campaign. It ensures that the brand understands its markets. It ensures that the brand understands its competitors. It helps ensure that a brand is aware of the changes in the marketplace environment, better to able to understand and communicate and coordinate activities, and it enables success to be defined and measured. So we're going to go through the steps of a strategic planning of a social media campaign. So the first step is information from research on an industry, competitors, product category, and consumer market is analyzed, and the data is presented in a SWOT analysis, often referred to as a SWOT, S-W-O-T. The SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So within the internal environment of your brand's organization, we're talking about the controllable elements within the brand's organization as the strengths and the weaknesses. So what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses about this brand? And then you have the external environment. These are uncontrollable elements outside of the brand's organization, and we identify these as opportunities and threats. Step 2 is identify the social media marketing objectives with the specific statement about social media activity and what it intends to accomplish. So some of the things that you might want to think about accomplishing in this step is increase brand awareness, or improve the reputation of the brand, or increase website traffic, maybe improve search engine rankings, generate sales leads, or just increase sales. So you have a lot of different objectives you can have for your plan, but you need to have some type of objective to be able to measure if you met that objective in the end. So characteristics of a good social media objective statement. It needs to be specific. It can't be vague, because how are you going to measure that in the end if it's not specific? It needs to be measurable. So you can't have an objective that you can't measure. You need to have a timeline or of how these objectives are going to be met. And of course, it needs to be realistic, meaning, can we even accomplish this? Or do we have the budget to do this? So it has to be realistic. This is not a dream. This is something that you're actually going to set out to accomplish. Let's move on to step 3. This is setting a budget. The budget includes paying someone like a social media manager or a social media assistant. This helps ensures that there are sufficient resources and funds to accomplish your objectives. So you have social media managers. That's actually a position that you could have, generate content, or you manage the content, things of that nature. So that's included in your budget, in addition to things like how much does it cost to have this Facebook site or to advertise on Facebook or things of that nature. There are different budget approaches that a brand company can take. The first one is the percentage of ad spend. This is a set of a percentage of the overall advertising budget that is assigned to the social media activities. So if you have $100,000 as your advertising budget and you want to take 5% of that $100,000 and spend on social media activities, that's called percentage of ad spend. Then you have competitive parity. This is you go by your competitors' spend as a benchmark on what their budget should be. So if they're spending $100,000 and this is your biggest competitor, then we should spend $100,000. The rationale is spending the same or more will result in a comparable change in the market share for the brand. So you see Coke is spending a certain amount, so you try to match that so you can get a bigger share of the market like they do. Doesn't always work, but that's the approach to take. The objective and task method determines the cost based on the objectives. So in the step above, where you have your objectives, then you base your budget on what your objectives are. The next step is step 4, identify the social media profile of the target audience. Your target audience is defined in the marketing plan as their demographics and psychographics. And we'll talk more about this later on in the semester. So there are social media profile models. So for example, social technographics. So you have creators, conversationalists, you have critics, you have collectors, you have joiners, spectators, and inactives. And we'll talk more about this as well as we talk about targeting your audience. Step 5. And this is talked about in your book, the different zones, channels, and vehicles. So you need to identify these social media zones, channels, and vehicles. So zones are communities, publishing, commerce, and entertainment. And like I said, it talks about all of these zones in your book in more detail. Then you have mediums, which is often referred to as channels. This is the way in which communication travels. So within each medium, there are vehicles. So if we're saying community, within that community, it may be blogs or microblogs. So social networking sites would include Facebook and LinkedIn. And then the blogs and microblogs would be like WordPress or Twitter or Blogspots. And then you have media sharing sites like YouTube, Flickr, and SlideShare. So you need to identify these zones, these channels, and these vehicles that you plan to use to accomplish your objective. Step 6 is create a strategy for each vehicle. Step 7 is to execute the strategy for each vehicle. And then the last step is to measure the outcome. So did you meet your objective that you planned to meet? If not, you need to start over from the beginning. If so, you can still make changes to make it better or continue as you are doing because it's successful. So here's a review. We had 8 steps in the social media strategic planning. You have the situation analysis, objectives, a budget, a social media profile. You have the zones, the channels, and vehicles. And then you have a strategy for each vehicle. And then you have execute and measure. So those are the 8 steps that you need to follow to do a social media strategic plan. Let's move on to a case study. Case study shows examples of how all of this is put into play and how it actually works in the real world. In 2014, Coca-Cola kicked off a social media craze by removing its iconic Coca-Cola script logo from the 20-ounce bottles of soda and replacing it with 250 of the most popular first names for American teens and millennials. Fans could get involved more heavily by visiting shareacoke.com to send personalized virtual bottles and share them with friends via Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram using the hashtag #ShareACoke. Consumers also shared their stories and photos for a chance to be featured on an interactive Coke billboards across the country. Users with the free Coca-Cola Freestyle mobile app were encouraged to scan a QR code on the fountain dispenser touchscreen and send a friend a coupon for $1 off a 20-ounce Coke. The Share a Coke campaign first launched in Australia in 2011 and since expanded to more than 50 countries, inviting fans to find their names or names of people special to them. So even if you couldn't find the names, they had things like Buddy and Mom on bottles of Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero across the USA. So let's look at a case study of a great social media strategic plan. And first, here's one of the TV commercials for this campaign.
Hey, think of all that we could do if we started with me and you. And I'll keep coming back around. Hey, some things will never be explained. Summer's calling out 1,000 names. And I'll keep coming back around. I'll keep coming back around. It all started with you and me. Oh, wait and you'll see. I'll keep coming back around. I'll keep coming back around. I'll keep coming back around.
Okay, now we have, here is a print ad for the campaign. Always with the hashtag #ShareACoke, because this is what's driving the social media campaign. So there were more than 125,000 posts about the campaign across all social media channels during the summer of 2014. And this is from June 2nd to July 14. 96% of the comments were positive or neutral. Coke sales rose 2.5% in dollar terms during the campaign. So let's look at how they did it. And these stats that I just read you, I'll present them on one of the next slides.
So share a Coke. What did it really take to make it happen?
One very different type of brief.
5 of the best agencies that we work with in the region pitching on the idea.
They presented a really big idea.
She knew we would have trademark issues.
At least 20 late night hours with Atlanta.
25 separate risk assessment meetings.
And one massive global brand exception.
150 submissions to our marketing approvals committee.
4,000 hours of talking to Coca-Cola Amatil stakeholders individually.
4 weeks to find a machine that could print the names on the can.
40 hours to get the Coke Red right.
225 trademark searches to check the names.
2,302 artworks.
303,669 point-of-sale pieces nationally.
Every single word reviewed and approved by senior management.
We had to put a profanity filter together with every single name under the sun that could offend someone within Australia.
There were 5,287 words that we didn't really want on our cans or projected onto Australia's best known outdoor sites.
There were naughty words.
50 or 60 pages worth of profanity.
Added a couple of my own in there.
At least 5 rude words I'd never heard of.
It was very, very educational. I've started using some since.
Then there were 3 nights in a dodgy King's Cross hotel, making sure no dodgy words were projected.
50% of all words people wanted projected needed to be blocked.
Only one word got through. I'm not saying what.
That's classified, I'll have to tell you.
I'm well aware of the word that got through.
What was it?
I didn't know what it meant.
You're not going to get me to say it on camera.
No one's told me about that one.
I put the call out to our reps to contribute material.
About 40% of them sent in some very personal photos.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Marie had a good time. The content I received was probably a bit more than I needed. Naked.
Someone wrote in and said that they were horrified that the word beastie was on their can.
It actually said bestie.
2 out of 5 Australians bought a Share a Coke pack. For the malls, we budgeted 70,000 cans. In the end, we needed 360,000.
And in a country of under 23 million people, we sold over 250 million individual personalised packs of Coca-Cola.
Oh my god.
Okay, so these are the stats that I had read to you before. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. So once again, more than 125,000 posts about the campaign across social channels during the summer of 2014. 96% of the comments were positive or neutral. And Coke sales rose 2.5% in dollars during the campaign. A few more other statistics about the campaign. Over 1,000 different names on the bottles. 998 million impressions on Twitter with this hashtag. 235,000 tweets from 111,000 fans using the Share a Coke hashtag. More than 150 million personalized bottles sold. So that's when you can add your own names or what you want on your bottles. And over 730,000 glass bottles published via the e-commerce store. So here's a chart of the Instagram activity during that period. As you can see, the neon green engagement line closely follows and even surpasses the number of brand posts. That's a big sign of success here. So you have the red represents the photos posted, and the blue represents the videos posted. We will talk about matrix and measures more in the following weeks to come. Here's another visual representation. So on Twitter, this is from Twitter, between May 20th and September 16, there were more than 340,000 mentions of hashtag share a quote on Twitter. This chart shows two serious spikes in the use of the hashtag. On July 13th, you see there, you have a spike, and then on July 29th, you have a huge spike. So what was going on these 2 days during this period? July's 13th spike was derived largely from this tweet. Hashtag GGV stands for Ganga Gaiba Vice, a Philippine comedy variety show and talk show hosted by a stand-up comedian, Vice Ganda. Ponies is a term of endearment that Ganda has used for his fans and fans of the show. This is a perfect example of how hashtag Share a Coke's campaign fostered, highlighted, and encouraged closeness between already existing communities on social media. July 29th spike can be attributed to tweets about this YouTube video. Hashtag Share a Coke partnered with the teen YouTube celeb Cameron Dallas, who boosts almost 3 million subscribers to connect more closely to millennials. Let's take a look at it.
Come on. Let's go.
What up? Thanks, bro.
What up? How's it going? It's all good.
Hey, Chase. Woo! That's what I'm talking about. Let's go. Hey, Kevin. Alright, cool.
On Facebook, the Share a Coke hashtag campaign won with videos and tons of fan engagement. Take, for example, this winning post, which received 50,964 total engagement. It says, a skateboarding dog, easy. Teaching her to share command was the tough part. Unfortunately, that 6-second video had no sound, but you get the whole gist of it. So the Share a Coke campaign drove a lot of activity, initially instigated by Coca-Cola, but at a certain point took on a life of its own. The hashtag got adapted by other communities, benefited from brand-created content across all its social media channels, and is a wonderful example of how a social media campaign concept and strategy doesn't have to be complicated to become ultra successful. Enjoy the rest of your day.